Okay, hello there, Grand Rising. This is the first episode of season 2 of Barely Doing Stuff Now with Words. I normally make these videos in like short little clip cuts for my TikTok. What that was is some herbs. My table is covered in herbs. And so being directly on camera like this is going to be something that I have to adjust to. But that's fine because I'm used to it. But like having you consistently stare at me and making eye contact with the camera while I talk, I'm going to have to give myself a little reminder that the camera is right here. But that's okay. So, today's talk, oh my god, this might explode. I'm not going to open this on camera because I'm wearing light colored clothing and it's fermenting and it looks like it wants to look at the button. Anywho's, I have been thinking today, and what I wanted to talk about is how like a lot of the time when I communicate with people, they aren't familiar with the ways that they process their pain. And that's been something that I've had to like study after going through the pain of my last relationship ending, coming to the facts that I was being damaging and detrimental in that relationship, um, understanding that they knew and didn't know that they were being abusive simultaneously. It's a complicated situation to kind of understand because an autistic person and a person with um, a personality disorder can be aware and unaware simultaneously that they are doing something harmful and not harmful. Um, because while they may understand that they're doing something that is not necessarily causing good feelings to the other person involved, their personality disorder may not deem that unnecessary. And while I had to experience it, forgiving them and recognizing their mental disorders and all of the placements that they hold. Because I don't really believe in mental disorders. I believe in choice of matter. Because that would everyone has a mental disorder in that case. To me specifically, I would say everyone has a mental disorder. I would express that everyone has a level of autism. I constantly express these two thoughts simultaneously, actually, because again, the whole psychological and give me a second to figure out what the name of the field is. Psychiatric field is like based on the caste system, which was developed by Mendel, which basically says like anyone of a darker complexion is dumb and has ill intent and is aggressive for no reason. So, that being said, my partner at the time was Caucasian. The last several have been Caucasian. I have experienced the same behavior in female oriented people who are not Caucasian, but that's irregardless. This particular person that I'm referring to was white. So I have this like real intense experience. I have this real intense information upload of how people will take the pain of their previous relationships, whether it be their parents, whether it be their siblings, whether it be a boss, whether it be an ex partner, and if they themselves haven't healed the fact that they were being abused, they will take that abuse and turn it into power for themselves. I've seen people abuse their kids. I've seen people abuse their partners. I've seen people abuse their animals. I've seen people abuse their family members. I've seen people take the abuse that was done to them and then turn it back on someone they feel is weaker than them because it gives them a source of power. I've seen this in the workplace with bosses slash managers that rise up in position and then they start like pointing down at their fellow coworkers when they were just in that placement, but because they were given a different title, because they were given a different position, they now have the power and authority to now abuse the person. Um, I just have a lot of situations where I can experience that, and what I want to talk about today is like taking responsibility for oneself. Because I said, like when I started this, I feel like mental disorders, they aren't real to me. They aren't. There is definite accountability with being able to witness a behavior, being able to witness a pattern, being able to see that a behavior is indicative to a reaction slash response to the environment that you're in. But to say like you have a mental disorder, to say that you have a thing that's wrong with you that cannot be rectified, cannot be um, solved throughout your lifetime based on a chemical response your brain is having in the moment. I don't like that because then it becomes a crutch. It's not like a physical disorder. It's not like PTSD, which is a physical disorder. It's not a mental disorder. We call it a mental disorder because it happens in the brain. Um, but it's not a physical disorder. It's a mental disorder. I mean, it's not a mental disorder. It's a physical disorder. Sorry, text messages keep popping up on my screen, so I'm reading them and trying to process at the same time. When you experience PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, by the way, and complex post-traumatic stress disorder, depending on your scenario, because a lot of situations involved can be very complex depending on what happened to you, who was involved with what happened to you. Your brain has scar tissue, which is a physical response to the pain. When we talk about mental disorders, we talk about chemical imbalances, which is something completely different as far as like I'm concerned. Um, Now, a physical response, so forth, is such as like concussions, brain scarring in your tissue because of those nerves being fired repeatedly, is not the same as something like autism, which is a physical disability that manifests through a mutation. It's not the same as a chemical imbalance, such as, for me again, not the same as, I'm trying to think of the phrasing, chemical, I say chemical imbalance. Addiction is the phrase that I'm looking for, but there's another way that you could phrase it. Chemical dependency. People who take pills, um, people who need adrenaline burst, they get aggressive. That's also like a response to PTSD in some occasions, because that's how they've learned to live their life. Me specifically, I learned to live my life in a way that said that if someone confronted me with aggression, then I was to meet them with an equal or more powerful force. So when it came time for me to like develop the calming down, to like lower my expectation of violence in those altercations, it was really difficult to me, especially in the white community, being a brown person, because white people are extremely passive aggressive and will do stuff like point at you with scissors, when in the black community that means I'm about to be stabbed sometimes. Um, Pointing in someone's face like that is definitely a threat for violence, because that movement can easily turn to a punch, smack, eye poke very quickly in a community where you're raised where violence and aggression is the first thing. Now, am I saying every black community is like that? No, I'm saying that my community specifically, where I was raised, not in my household, but my household was pretty violent. They just weren't like maliciously trying to stab my eyes out. Just the community that I lived in had some people that might have tried that. So I defer. I digress from my tangent. But so there's this balance that you have to think about, where you're like making all these judgments based upon this system that was developed to like lower people of color regardless of these placements that they found themselves at. And so when I experience these things with people, I have got to do like rapid response processing to try to like figure out where these people lie. I've got to understand that if they're white, they have a whole system structure that says that they can have like meltdowns, they can have like full on I quit days, and then go back to work the next day, and there not be any like really serious, any kind of repercussions to that. I've seen people like have anxiety and then still have like full lives where they like, have a car, they get paid a stipend from the government. These are white people, by the way. and they don't do anything other than fuck, drink, and go out whenever they want to because they're being stipended by the government. But then I've seen people who are disabled, not with anxiety, with stuff like MS, with lupus, with sickle cell anemia, not be able to get the same kind of treatment from the government where they're not receiving a stipend large enough to live off of. We could talk about generational wealth and all that other stuff, but it's too much in this particular topic matter. I really just want to stay focused on the placement of people taking their previous abuse and then transferring it over to power. I want to stay there because, again, I was abused as a person. I was abused very intensely. I have been something like 5'11", 6 foot since I was 11 years old. So I have looked down at damn near every adult that I can think of since I was 11 years old. I am now, how old am I? I don't really map out my age anymore. I stopped following the lunar cycle that says that my body is decaying because that doesn't process with me. I want to be one with the universe, so I kind of let go. I'm 33. But yes, I don't follow that cycle as much. So I forget sometimes how old I am because inside my head there's an amount of information that says that I've been here previously and that I will be here after this point. But I digress. So I've been abused immensely, and a lot of what this body does in defense to being aggressed upon says that abuse is the best defense. It showed me that as a child because when adults started getting defensive with me, when they thought they would say things like, "Are you trying to be smart?" Which is, "Are you insinuating that I'm dumb?" They would say things like, "Oh, so you think you big?" Having full recollection that I was this big all the time and having no idea how to process, do I think I'm big? Do I think I'm bigger than the person that's talking to me that I am looking down at? There was this real strong desire to get me to not be the large that I am. So when it comes to my defensive mechanisms, it doesn't matter what size a person is because when I was not this big, because it was a transition of very fast. It took 3 months for me to get this large. I grew very fast. I have stretch marks all over my body that are scar tissue that have never healed, that have never left my physical frame. And people say, "Oh yeah, stretch marks because you get larger, you get smaller." Yeah, this happened when I was 10 though. I had rubbed calamine lotion all over my body. The splits were everywhere. They were bust open. I had to wash off scabs because my skin literally exploded from how big I got so fast. That being said, I've been this large for a while. When I wasn't this large, though, people would do things like yank me up by my right arm, which I can still have sensory issues in the shoulder blade because of that feeling, because I've got so much in line of that trauma, physically and mentally, with being yanked by my arm whenever someone wanted to abuse me. I had trauma along the lines of I was tortured with dogs, sat in a place, dogs were put very close to my face on a chain, barking and trying to snarl at me to get some kind of fear response, being locked in a small space, being locked in a basement. I've got lots of trauma as a small person. So I don't have a lot of fears when it comes to physical abuse, mental abuse. What happens in my situation is that what happened prior, because I can't say that that's current, is I would be faced with someone telling me that this was a safe space. We create a space of safety, trust, communication, love. There's lots of reliable things in this space. And then what would happen is because they weren't being earnest. Now, honesty is a different thing. Truth is a different thing. Earnest, you should define that. You should look that up and define what earnest is and then compare it to the word honesty, because we use those words differently. And I'm extremely earnest, whether that be through my trauma or not. It's been something that I've always done. Being in this earnest space, people would stop being earnest and they would start being honest with themselves and no longer communicating that out loud. So what they thought was the truth, what they thought was safe, what they thought was trust, how they were taught love, how they were explained those things would become prevalent to the engagement that we made together. You know, I could even do the heart symbol. You know, it's on this side, so I apologize for it not being the right direction. I could even do the heart symbol to display that it takes two to make that space to come together and you to have that unified relationship of love. So when people stopped doing that, I would immediately be triggered because my initial response was, "Oh, I'm safe. You know, this is safety because I've created a communication that says, please don't do any of these things. I don't like any of that stuff. And this is all the stuff that I love. And you can do as much of that as you want to. I'll never get tired of the stuff I love. You could just all day for the rest of your life give me the stuff that I love, and I won't stop any of that." So when I think about how people have learned to take the trauma that they've experienced and then turn it into power for themselves, my witness account and my personal experience. Now, I don't have like a background in psychology. I don't have a background in psychiatrics. I don't have a background in any of those fields of study outside of I went to college once. I probably tried 3 times, but I went to college once, and I had my psychology professor tell me to stop going to college. Now, this is not like, oh, an educator wanted to like limit me. This was an African American woman. This was a very intelligent woman. She did everything she could. I would say them, they, even at that point in time, before it became popular and wide known and spread, she was very non-binary at that point because of her control and power of her masculinity. She didn't believe in being a suppressed woman. She very much facultied that it was gonna happen. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna be the one that gets it done. Her and her husband were very united on their front. They didn't stop those things. So, with that being said, this woman pulled me aside one day after class and said, "Hey, you're very intelligent. The way you process information is much faster than the way that I process information, and much faster than the way the class processes information. Maybe you need to work on your retention a bit, but I think you should stop going to college." And at first it like punched me in the face, like, "You're terrible, you're the worst," because up until that point in time, that's the only kind of like information I had received. Like, if I wasn't doing something the way someone else told me to do it, it was wrong. And she was actually saying to me, "Hey, the way you process information is slow as fuck for this process. You're not a linear thinker." Because she gave me the syllabus for the class, and I read all of the books before the class started because I didn't know what a syllabus was. I had no fucking clue. It was my first time attending college on a like literal like in a physical way. I don't know how old I was. I can't remember, but it was like 2011 possibly. Maybe 2010, into 2010 for that semester, because you sign up a little bit earlier than you go at the end of that, whatever. Case may be, it was a very, very wonderful compliment she gave me, because she was essentially telling me that I had a nonlinear thought process, which is great. As you've been listening to me, you've seen that I've tanged it in and out of things, but I'm very good at bringing things back. I'm very good at listening. I have a visual board behind me. I barely use that shit though, because most of my information is eclectically put into like file cabinets in my head. I kind of want to stay on task though, but I want to get this point out the way. She basically said that you don't need to go to college this way. You need to go figure out information on your own accord, because what you're doing is you won't slow down for the class. You want to talk to me as an equal, which I fucking love, because oh my god, I've never, experiencing a one-on-one student meet me on equal terms is, it's great. But the class as a whole paid for a slower process. That's what they want. That's why they come to college, because they receive information, they obtain information in a slow way. Now, this was like after I've already had a bunch of trauma. I had already had children, and my experience with children, very detrimental. I was groomed and so forth and so on. I can explain that in another video. But so this communication that I was having with her was telling me to like take my skill and aptitude for learning very fast and then to run with it. As you can see, I still keep forgetting where the camera is because I'm looking at my face. And I keep forgetting to look into the camera so that you guys can be receiving my attention wholeheartedly when I'm doing the video. Literally gonna get something that says, like, look here. um, so with that being said, taking witness to, like, I was telling you I didn't have a background in psychology and I didn't have any like study in that stuff, but I had taken some counseling because again, going through these terrible scenarios in my life and people placing the blame on me because of my reactions being so volatile, because I was taught a volatile way, I was taught in a volatile way to respond with validity. I'm sorry, with a match of energy. I was taught to do that back. Um, so I was always the one that took responsibility because, again, I'm earnest. I'm earnest. Every time that I've been arrested, they have arrested me for the thing that I did and whatever else they thought was appropriate to put on those pieces of paper because I'm earnest. Now, some people say, oh, you're dumb. I've gotten like into scenarios where my kids have been taken from me, or at least my son was taken from me because I was earnest. You know, I explained a very harrowing situation where I was spearing, because women aren't the only people who go through postpartum. Men go through it too. It's just more volatile because we don't have there's a chemical that a female body produces that a male body does not produce, regardless of how much non-binary I want. Chemically, I understand that the separation that occurred that made males male and females female is chemically. Whether that whether that hormone can be produced in some males or not, I'm unsure, unclear, because I haven't had that experience yet. But in my experience, I was not able to produce the chemical that makes crying something tolerable. It was very intolerable to me. It was very difficult for me to handle crying. It was very difficult to handle the whole process of pregnancy and unpregnancy. It could have had something to do with my psychic abilities and my empathic abilities communicating with my partners, but it was very difficult for me. So being earnest in that situation got me removed from that household. And CPS being the way that they are, you know, they're kid smugglers and child trafficking, essentially. They wanted to either take the kid from me or have me out of the household. And since that whole system is really like geared towards getting black males out of their family, you know, it's really geared for that, you know. So I had a scenario with that, and I have counseling experience. I have tons and tons of counseling experience because of all these scenarios where people are telling me I have BPD, I have, which is borderline personality disorder or bipolar disorder. I've been called dissociative disorder, explosive anger disorder, EAD. I have a list of disorders that people can align with me, but in every scenario that I've ever come across, because again, when you're talking to a person who is trained in these fields, they will use the book. Like how people will tell you you are a sinner and you are going to hell because of the Bible, they will use the book that they are taught out of to classify you with these things based upon how you fit into the criteria. Every person that has a disorder is environmental. All of them. I don't care who you're talking to, what you're talking about, what they've gone through, how much they've gone through, how intensely it's been for them, how small the reactions may have been, how much trauma they've incurred. It is literally the environment in which they live. And for me to have that understanding and to process all that information really fast, rapidly, while meeting new people and understanding that they will take the abuse that they've received and give it back as a source of power for themselves, it's very difficult for me. Because again, when I am faced with aggression, my triggered response is to meet it with more aggression. So I started practicing like Buddhism, Taoism. I started looking into the, what is that book called? Jeez. The Bible's is it's basic instructions if you really want to get into it. There's some stuff in there because every book has a bit of truth about how the universe operates. The Bhagavad Gita? I'm sorry, I'm fucking that up so bad, but I've looked into that book. I've looked into some philosophers like Ram Dass, Alan Watts, Terrence McKenna, motivational speakers like Tony Robinson, Les Brown. There are a lot of other people that I've over the years have just eclectically collected all of this information that essentially says take a break, pause, and breathe, because being reactive is a failure to yourself, and being responsive is having control of yourself in a scenario where someone wants to take your power from you. And I like being in control of myself, which is why I'm sober, because I used to smoke every day. From the age of 13 to as long as I can remember, I was smoking continuously. I have stopped smoking as of August of last year, and I stopped drinking alcohol probably the year prior. But regardless of that, and I think I had mushrooms twice, three times if you count like rolling it into marijuana and trying to get high from that. Doesn't work the same. It's more an ingestive thing. Reacts to your gut better. But I digress. I'm sober now because of the want of control over myself and other people. This kind of became more about me and less about the topic matter. I'm going to have to work on that. But I digress. You can watch this video and make all the assessments you want as you go. So I can't tell you how other people are going to respond to the information that they take the trauma that they've received in their life and they use it back as a source of power in themselves. But I can tell you how I've done it. I can always, in all of these videos, it's always going to be me. In all of these podcasts, and all of these communications, and all of these relays, it's going to be me talking about my experience. So if you don't want to hear about my experience after 26 minutes of listening to me talk about my experience, you're probably going to have a hard time, because I talk about my experience a lot. It's how I've healed from it. It's how I've been able to communicate from it, because I heard a quote once online, again, a lot of eclectic information, a lot of it, that said something essentially along the lines of all of the advice that we give to other people are so that we can heal the selves of our past. Because we wish we had that information then. So seeing someone else in that environment, seeing someone else go through that trial, seeing someone else go through that experience is us telling other people not to fail in the way that we thought we failed. And leading through that follow-up, I've heard another quote, pardon me, I'm going to take a drink in a second with my water mixture. I heard another quote that said something along the lines of, because I was talking about us giving advice based upon the experience that we had. Pardon me, I'm drawing a loss. I would pause this, but I don't care to, because I want you to have the whole consistency. I like when people are able to be themselves. I like earnesty. I like themselves being themselves. I don't want you to have to pretend to be in my world. I don't want you to have to engage with a falseness of self, a false sense of self. I don't want you to ever have to do that. Now, I may not use the most complex vernacular or vocabulary. My point is always to kind of like take a really complex conversation and turn it into like grilled cheese, which is like 2 parts a meal, because like all it is cheese and bread. If you're not being fancy, throwing on the seasonings and mayonnaise and all that other stuff that people might do to like flavor it up. So I like that. I enjoy that very much. I enjoy taking all of the complex thoughts that I have and kind of turning them into a condensed version of conversation so that it's more easily received and ingestible for people who want to have these kind of thoughts, people who want to have these kind of communications, people who would like to be able to learn themselves. I could instead, sit here with like lots of footnotes and tell you about all these authors, and I could tell you about every single document verbatim, and I could tell you about every single thing that's happened as so far as those people making this study, what the study is. But I don't believe in a lot of those studies, so it wouldn't do me any good to kind of relay that information to you in a way that would say, this is what I believe in. Give me a second, because I really need some water. I don't need it. I prefer it. My mouth is getting dry. So I lost where I was again. Oh, I was trying to figure out the quote that I was thinking of after um, I heard someone say that if you're giving advice, then it's because you're trying to heal the younger you. I can't think of it, so it's not that important. I might sneeze soon because my nose seems to be dry from all the talking. Yeah. Okay, so again, I like to communicate in an extremely earnest way. And again, it's only earnesty from my point of perspective, because someone could say, "Oh, well, Jim Carrey says," and I happen to love him a lot, and I watched his like entire breakdown process after his girlfriend committed suicide, which is something I can relate to in a multitude of different ways. But I had a previous ex in her life because she was tired of suffering through um, her disease. She had a disorder. It's a physical disease, and it stopped her from having as peaceful as a life as she would have liked. So after finding out that I was married for 3 weeks and us having a pretty big argument, she pretty much deceased. I'm not sure if that's in relation to me or if she just got tired after that particular argument, because I was someone that she had a lot of faith in, and that argument kind of tore us apart. So, being said, I pay attention to Jim Carrey a lot now because I watched a man lose himself. I watched him find himself, and then I watched him discard that person. Um, but I was already in the path of discarding the physical presence that you receive here after finding my teacher Ram Dass. Now, I never met the man personally, but spiritually, having someone connect through the camera the way that I keep trying to relay my eyes into the camera, having someone connect with me energetically through the spans of time and feel love like I've never felt in my personal family nuclear system blew my mind. Okay? I'd never received love like that from a human being. And I always had this really strong concept of this is what love feels like. This. Like I have an idea of it. And then I expected it from other people because of how earnest I live. I expected other people to say, oh, yeah, this is totally a great concept that you have about love. And we can communicate that kind of love together. That's not often what I receive. Often enough times, it's you, specifically me, Bear, has a love that those people want. And because I have a love that those people want, they are willing to do whatever they can to stay in my good graces to receive that love from me. Because never before in their life have they received that type of love unconditionally from a source like me. Ugh. It's difficult because it's like being used. It is very much akin to being used. And I've done prostitution before. I've had to sell my body. I've chosen to sell my body to make a living. I've done general labor, which is essentially prostitution of the muscles rather than the sexual orientation. I've done all kinds of jobs in the field where I am trading resources for my time and my body's ability to process a skill, a craft, any kind of action that would have come about. And having someone desire my energy without being able to meet it equally back, without being able to pour back into me, is a constant letdown to have to experience continuously. Uh, it's frustrating to say in the least because again, I have this idea, this concept that the God, the universal creator, the being that we all are, regardless of how we want to like compose that thought, is everything all at the same time. Again, I'm looking at my face because I like my face, so I'm sorry. I apologize. But through that wave that you experience, because then you think of infinity, right? And you think of what a wave is, which is just basically an up and over, and you look at how infinity is shaped, and then you can see that that is actually the wave process that we're going through. There is a constant low. I wiggle this side to see that it's going into the high. I wiggle my thumb to see that you're at your low. I'll wiggle this side to see that we're going through another high. I'll wiggle this thumb to see that you're going through another low. And it's a process that continues itself because we constantly are doing that exchange continuously. It's always that loop. of the wave. It's always the crest and the trough. It's always the up and the down. And it's through those kind of lessons that we get to really perceive who we are and who we want to be, which is a part of why I love being the everything, which is why I love being the all, which is why I love being present, which is why I try to do these talks. I try to do these talks with the hope that I can communicate some of my experience to people who aren't this vessel, but are me. You know, you are me. I am you. My tattoo on my neck says, "You are, I am," because it communicates that if you can find yourself in the world that you live in, then you'll always show yourself love. You won't show yourself any kind of disregard. You won't say, "I can't love that being. I can't stand that person. I hate this. I dislike this moment. I dislike my life," because you will understand that you are this life. You are this moment. You are this being. And that's pretty much kind of what I wanted to talk about today. I was kind of talking about how we take the abuse that we received, and I repeat and reiterate that phrase because, again, I'm trying to really, really kind of condense it to a very, like, easily receivable substance, and talk about why I think that a lot of people aren't aware that they do that particular thing. Again, I know I tangented a great amount. I do that in every talk. I am not apologizing for that at all. But I do want to bring it back to what we initially started talking about, which was being aware of oneself, being aware of one's ability to control whether they've received a healthy type of love in their life or an abusive type of love, and then learning whether that's a love that someone else can take. Because BDSM is a community where people agree through consensual relationships that they can cause each other sensations that most would consider harmful, like deprivation. People can, like, degrade someone else by calling them a name or a slur, and it could make them feel really elated because they like that response in their body. They like the adrenaline, they like the dopamine rush from that response in another person. But it's a consensual relationship, and what I was talking about is how people have been abused and then start abusing without knowing that they're abusing other people. We're not aware of that. We don't know that. So for a really long time, I didn't know that. I didn't know that if I started receiving abuse, I would turn to my abuser's behavior and try to murder. I wouldn't physically try to strangle things. I have been strangled. But my defensive flair would come up and I would go, "Oh, yeah, you brought this on yourself," because that's a phrase that I've heard before. "Oh, you did this to yourself." That's a phrase that I've heard before. "This is your fault. If you hadn't done X, Y, and Z, this wouldn't be happening." That's a phrase that I've heard before. And so I would do that. I would do that wholeheartedly. Now I don't do that. Now people start doing stuff that's weird to me, and I go, that's interesting. I'm out. I'm gonna go over here because I'm gonna go over here because I don't have an if anymore. I'm gonna just go over here. But like, if physical violence happens, if you touch my boundaries of person, all the atoms that like structurally hold me together, and I have to like stop you, I will stop you. Don't do that. But like, I don't have to be like, stop. I don't have to do that anymore. And that's something that I used to do as well. And people will go, "Oh man, like, you're so violent. You verbally are loud with women." And I go, because like, that's what you're supposed to do, quote unquote. You're supposed to be verbally loud with women, quote unquote. You're not supposed to hit them, quote unquote, them being the women. But then I had this encounter as I was growing up where I met someone who was in transition from masculine to feminine, and they were still displaying masculinity. They were like, "I'll do whatever the fuck I want. You can't talk to me that way. You need to get the fuck out of my face." And I was like, "Rose, you were talking to me in a way that is making me feel very aggressed upon. And I would like to communicate in a softer way. Can we talk in a softer way, Rose? Because that would be super helpful to me." And they were like, "You need to get the fuck out of my face." And I was like, "Rose, I'm trying to appreciate and understand you in your female form. You are acting masculine, which is throwing me off because physically you are a man, and I don't argue with men. I fight them. So please stop." and they were like really aggressive. I had to like completely disengage because otherwise the cycle would have continued because in their life, women were really abusive. Like a lot to them. So they thought because they were making the transition from male to female, that they had to be really aggressive and abusive to get their point across. And because that's how women got away with things, that's how they got, like, I'm throwing quotes at this stuff because this is their belief system. Women get away with everything. They can do whatever they want and no one will hold them accountable. But as a male, you can't do that. You can't do shady stuff. You can't do violent things and so forth and so on. This was their belief. This isn't my belief. My belief is I've seen lots of women get arrested. I've seen women with scars on their cheek because they fight like ninjas, okay? And ninjas is the subpar title for a word that we don't use around these here bits. So, I'm smiling at it because I had to like transmute all the like previous memory of someone being like, grr, 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 and I have to go, yeah. My whole life experience has been someone is smaller than me, they're yelling in my face, and I could kill them. Some people hear that and go, psychopath, sociopath, all of the disorders in the book, and I go, I'm not sure you are familiar with how nature works. Larger thing isn't scared of smaller thing, but everything smaller than me tried to communicate that I should be scared of it. People, mindsets, personalities, people with small-minded relations to the world, their thought processes, their patterns. They were locked in their boxes, quote unquote. I don't live in a box. There's no box to me. Like when people say live outside of the box, I go, what box? What box are you referring to? Is there a box in your head? And they go, why do you always got to overcomplicate things? I was like, I'm trying to figure out the process that you're living through because what you're communicating to me right now is that I should have a fear of my life. I should have a fear of my understanding. I should have a fear of how I process information versus how you want me to process information. Again, I bring this back to discovering the fact that I was taking this abusive behavior that I had received and I was displaying it out into the world until I like brought myself to self. That statement right there. And when I brought myself to self, I was like, okay, so I am not the physical display. I am not the vessel. I am not the thing pertaining to the self that I have become aware of, because this is just a lesson of things I have received. These words, this language, the process of my vocal pattern, how I'm using this, because I could be speaking to you in a different language and it would be a completely different diction. I could do all the things that would make it so that I was sounding different and it wouldn't be me anymore. It'd be somebody else speaking to you. But it's not. It's me. It's this current personality. It's this person that's currently speaking to you from this display. This is made up. I do this comfortably. It is like how I breathe. We don't realize that we shallow breathe frequently. When's the last time you took a deep breath continuously like that and wasn't shortening yourself of oxygen? We do things comfortably because it's the easiest thing our brain will do. We do the fastest response that our brain will do. My brain is extremely fast, so I've always had to adapt. I've always had to adapt because I've lived outside, so forth and so on, homeless since I was 16. Sad story. My life is filled with them, but I became this beautiful person. To me, I'm beautiful. I became this beautiful person that you see before you because of the display being easier to handle with this process than it was to handle it in any other kind of process. Being the angry, violent black male that I should have been based upon the trauma that I received was difficult. It was difficult because I fear the angry, aggressive version of myself. I don't like violence. Violence has been done to me. I have done violence to others. I don't enjoy it. It makes me feel like icky is the best word I can think of. It makes me feel yucky. What's some other words that I can think of that like really relate to how I feel? The sun's shining and it's making me feel really glorious. It's just not a genuine feeling for me. Once I noticed that it was like an addiction that I had, I wanted to stop it immediately because I hate being effing controlled. Like, fuck being controlled. I can't stand being controlled. Like, even just this display now is something that I'm learning to handle. I don't have any control of it. It's a display that I'm learning to handle, okay? Getting to this point took letting go the knowledge of protection. It took letting go of um, knowing that I could rightfully harm whatever came at me. I don't have any regrets because I live from a very earnest standpoint. I don't disregard anything or any behaviors that I've ever done. Those were behaviors that I did to survive. Those were things I did to live. Those are behaviors that I will do again in some other variation of this life form through the many ethos and the multiple timelines that exist on each other. This is just one variation of me currently. There are timelines. There's so much information that we have out there in the world that says this isn't the only platform in which we exist on. We could talk about color spectrum. We could talk about energy spectrum. We could talk about how light is received and perceived, and we only see certain wavelengths. We could talk so much about how this particular phrasing, this particular space isn't the only space. And so when I talk about being in control of this, learning to manage this, I'm talking about learning to manage ease of this particular display. And doing the peace, doing the Buddhism, doing the loving content, doing the I want to help, Little Nicky, release the good. Many people hate Adam Sandler for some reason, but he also went through like a breakdown where he mentally came out and started making movies and videos that were look past all of the filth and the crud and the crudeness and look at the story that he's telling in a lot of the movies that he made in relation to how stupid, quote unquote, they are, how poor comedy, quote unquote, they are. And look at the story there. Look at what he's telling you to do. Little Nicky was release the good. Take the darkness that lived in you and then transmute that shit into something else. Because all of us come from a place of darkness. Like my plant's bud just like grew during this talk, and anyways, we all come from a place of darkness because we all start in an abusive scenario because our parents were abused. The system that we live in, being America, quote unquote, or other places in the world that have governments, quote unquote, are all abusive systems. They're systems that say I must exact an order of control on you so that there can be control, because if there's no control, then we'll have anarchy. And anarchy is a complex thought that I don't touch on right now because it says that there shouldn't be any order, which is absolutely different than how I believe that display is, but I digress. I think we're living in anarchy right now. I think we all have our own rules, and I think that's what anarchy is. I think white people receive different rules than us. I think women receive different rules than us. I think black men receive different rules than us. I think LGBT community receive different rules than us. I think everyone has their own rules, and if you look at how anarchy is defined, it's everyone having their own rules to maintain a certain order in that. But again, I said I wouldn't talk on it too much. I want to leave you with the thought that if you have received abuse, if you have had a situation in a scenario where you think something that you've done is abusive, I want you to look at how it might reflect in what you do when you're in your defensive state. When you're in a state that says, I must protect myself. Is it isolation? Is it self-harm, as so far as like not cleaning yourself, not bathing, not eating properly, induced substance abuse? Is it sexual behaviors? Is it rapid approach to response as far as relationship goes? There's so many different ways that you can abuse yourself that we don't think about. I really want to end this within the next minute or so, so I'm going to say that I love you and be safe always, always. I tell people that once they hear that phrasing from me, it's a curse, because what I understand curses to be is that they're unbreakable. You can transfer them, they can be rejected, they can be bounced back, but I haven't heard of them being broken. So I want to say, be safe, always, always, and I say that ALLWAYS, comma, space ALWAYS. I love you again. Thank you for coming to this particular talk with me. And yeah, I don't know exactly what I'm going to title this as, but it's reflective to essentially transmuting abuse. And I hope that you guys heal in the way that I've healed if not more so, and then you're able to go out and heal with others. So yeah, have a good day. I love you. Mwah.